Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'm hosting today's show. Up first on the hazardous weather chart, we've got some yellow areas here signifying wind advisories that are out from currently out and will be out through tonight. Here from the Yukon Flats, Fort Yukon area, Koyukuk Valley, Bettles, Greater Ambler area there in the Kobuk Valley, as well as Tanana. Winds gusting 40 to 45 miles an hour could, create areas of drifting snow, maybe even blowing snow, and that's mostly for higher terrain areas, of course, such as Indian Mountain, for example. And again, that's out through tonight and tomorrow. And that's it as far as advisories go. So we'll move on to satellite imagery. And you can see starting out, excuse me, dry here over the southeast coast, but rain spreading up from the south there. And that brought about, let's see, a little over half an inch of rain today to Ketchikan. So definitely heaviest precipitation definitely down to the south with just about nothing up to the north there. And actually a few sun breaks looks like occurring on the north coast, and more of that over the interior of the state today. You can see a lot of clearing here over the east central interior areas, and then you pick the clouds up in the southeasterly flow across the southwest interior and coast with rain spreading into Kodiak Island there. Not so much associated with this storm, but another trough up through here. But that brought about 2,700s to Kodiak State Airport, 24-hour amount ending this afternoon at about 1 p.m. And more clouds progressing northeastward here, or I'm sorry, yeah, to the northwest in that weaker flow up through here, and some lingering clouds western Arctic coast, and a stronger front with a pretty with a storm force low, good way to put it, out there over the western Bering Sea, bringing gusts of 65 to 75 miles an hour here to the western Aleutians. You can see those westerlies driving colder air aloft eastward there to the central Aleutians with the showers, just about getting to the Nikolsky area, and picture time here on Alaska in the dry slot right behind the front there. So rain shifting over to the Alaska Peninsula, where Chignik picked up about half an inch of rain, or a little over half an inch of rain today in the last 24 hours. And on the chart, there's the front right there with mostly rain, or all rain, falling across the Alaska Peninsula, and again up to Kodiak Island. Rain associated with this trough right here that brought a little bit of moisture up to the North Gulf Coast, and also trying to develop on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range areas. And enough lines close enough together here again to produce those wind advisory zones there through the central interior. Gusts will continue to increase this evening, come up that 40-45 mile per hour range this evening. Mostly looking this afternoon, they were 30 to maybe 35 miles an hour in gusts. And also the eastern Arctic coast, pretty breezy with a little bit less wind there on the west side. You can see several troughs pushing numerous showers eastward across the Aleutian chain. Warm front spreading the rain up into the Panhandle tonight. The main system still farther back out to the west. This warm front will dissipate tonight and can become more showery. But late tonight, toward tomorrow morning, rain will increase here along the coast as this frontal system pushes eastward. And also we're looking for gale force winds tonight here for the North Gulf Coast down into Kodiak Island, with periods of rain, light rain, right along the outer coastline here. And the upslope areas with that east-southeast flow could see some areas of rain or snow. Of course, the daily elevation now will be in the form of snow there for the eastern Kenai Peninsula and western Prince William Sound, possibly as far west as Girdwood, but amounts will be quite light there, and same pattern there on the Alaska Range. And then this front kind of linking up moisture-wise with the system to the southeast, so it's kind of a general area of precipitation from Kodiak into Bristol Bay, and then up along the coast there, this pushing in. But due to higher pressure building in here, this front really doesn't move much through tomorrow. I've got northwesterly flow here pulling the front this way to the southeast, and then this portion wrapping back around the weakening low center there. So this stretch of the front right through here, you can see you lose the winds. And this area of precipitation will not be very heavy at all, and probably looks a little more impressive than what will actually be tomorrow afternoon along the southwest coast. and most of the moisture again dropping into the Alaska Peninsula or stretching back to the west there. Mostly sunny tomorrow, interior Alaska, and for Wednesday as well, maybe you'll see definitely an increase in the clouds because there'll be more cloudiness coming into the area there from the southeast here with the mostly clear skies now for the North Slope, maybe the Arctic coast, most of the Arctic coast, on into Kivalina, Point Hope, Kotzebue looks really good, Shishmaref, Seward Peninsula, maybe a few clouds with dry conditions all the way out to the southwest coast. Just some scattered showers with this trough, and again, maybe one might catch Nunivak Island. Pribilof's a little more likely to see a few scattered rain and snow showers, as well as the eastern Aleutians with a weak trough there. And that low now really weakening from what it is today. Currently now forecast for Wednesday, 1,006 millibars there, really not a factor anymore. And some light rain coming up to the Aleutians associated with this front pushing northward there. Looks like northeasterly winds will be strongest, but under gale force out here over the western Aleutians. And yet another front pushes northward and brings more rain into the southern panhandle in the afternoon. And we've got a trough from the northern southeast coast here along the North Gulf Coast. And it looks like periods of rain, Kodiak Island, light rain, or showers, with showers more scattered in nature here along the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound. Really not making much inland progress at all, so all of the interior looks to be dry. And for low temperatures tomorrow morning, 0 to 5 above, for the most part, northeast interior, south of the mountains, North Slope, and Arctic coast. Same thing, 0 to 5 above now, losing the below zero readings we've had for so long, and now upper 30s to lower 40s here for the Panhandle, 30s, southern Alaska, above freezing, as you can see, into Bristol Bay, just barely getting under 40. And for the highs for tomorrow, shaping up like this, looks like lower 50s. Kenai Peninsula there, Soldotna, up into the Susitna Valley, lower to mid-50s, Matanuska Valley, Copper River Basin, possibly lower to mid-40s, Tanana Valley, teens, North Slope and Arctic coast, and 50s, well into the 50s, mid-50s for the Panhandle in some locations, 40s out west. And then for the lows the next morning, right around zero, some areas dropping back a little below zero there along the eastern Arctic coastal areas, maybe the Brooks Range as well, but warmer, milder, mid-20s, Tanana Valley, teens out to the Seward Peninsula, and right at the frost point there for St. Paul, and lower to mid-30s for the Aleutians, and lower 40s for the Panhandle, translates into lower to mid-50s for the afternoon highs, and a little bit cooler for south central Alaska, Susitna Valley, still pushing up maybe into the lower 50s, teens on the Arctic coast, and mid-40s for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Looking at flying weather, we've got a band of IFR here, St. Matthew Island, northern Bering Sea, Yukon Delta coast on southeastward here to the Alaska Peninsula, and some of that sliding on up into the, along and over the east side of Kodiak Island there to the Barrens, a little bit here, east side Kenai Peninsula, say Talkeetna Mountains, western Copper River Basin possibly, and then here in the north side of the eastern Alaska Range. Not too bad over the north central interior, IFR central Arctic coast, marginal VFR, Bering Sea and the Aleutians, southeast coast, marginal VFR areas of mostly central and northern part, better to the south. Tomorrow afternoon looks like a little more widespread marginal VFR down south and a little less up to the north. Otherwise, marginal VFR here, Talkeetna Mountains, actually the Coast Range right up the east side there to probably south of Eagle, and it looks like it's spreading in along and north of the White Mountains. Otherwise, good VFR here in the west, North Slope, VFR, Arctic Coast, same thing, and narrow band of IFR, narrower, here from about the same position there, but pulling back from the coast a little bit, so marginal for Nunivak Island, VFR almost right out, including the coastline, but not quite, to IFR, Bering Sea side of the peninsula, and some VFR increasing there over the central Aleutians. But that kind of goes the other way for Wednesday morning there, but still no IFR out there in the west. More IFR here, Yukon Delta coast pushing inland, and also up here over the central western North Slope areas, Arctic coast, and then VFR to the east. A little bit more marginal VFR here up over the eastern interior. Areas of marginal VFR here for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and more marginal conditions, an increase from what you saw in the afternoon for this Panhandle. but that will burn off and pull off the coast for Wednesday afternoon, so looking really good there for the afternoon, and north central interior as well. Still some lingering marginal VFR up along the Arctic coast, and more IFR, a wider band now here coming back toward the coastline and on down to the Alaska Peninsula. Passes Anatuvik and Adigan, both VFR tomorrow. And for the Western Alaska Range, go marginal VFR, Lake Clark, Merrill, and Rainy, with the lowest conditions will be found on the eastern approaches of all three passes, although probably a little better up here for Rainy with a little less moisture. VFR for windy. And Isabel, marginal VFR trending toward, VFR trending toward marginal in the afternoon. Montesa, though, VFR for the most part throughout the day, kind of optimistic forecast there. And for Tenita, VFR. Portage, IFR eastern entrance, otherwise marginal. And Chilkoot and White, IFR with a little improvement to marginal VFR. Freezing levels here about 4,000 feet there right over the central southeast coast. And then we've got freezing levels warmer air aloft here up there along the north slope and Arctic coast, 2,000 to 4,000 feet or so, and about 4,000 feet here over the southwest interior. So a little bit milder air aloft here. And then out west, though, freezing levels at the surface well south of the, below 2,000 feet to the south of the Aleutians, but the surface there just south of St. Matthew Island on down in toward Kuskokwim Bay. And for icing, again with that front, we've got kind of a narrow band of mostly light, but could be some isolated considerable moderate rime icing here on down to the Alaska Peninsula. Should stay west of even Nunivak Island, up the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, fair threat there of some icing conditions, again above about 4,000 feet, up along the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound, and then down mostly over the southern Panhandle to Dixon entrance. Jet stream upper level ridge here, just kind of now up over the Arctic coast, or off the Arctic coast, and southern Alaska here more in the influence of these troughs to the south there, especially the one that's swinging up off the south coast of the Panhandle tomorrow afternoon, and then some more out here to the west with ridging in advance, and 9,000 feet. Pretty good winds here, easterlies 30 to 40 knots at 9,000 feet along the North Gulf Coast, even stronger down toward Kodiak Island at 50 knots. 25 to 30 here across the north central interior, out of the east, and then northwesterlies, 32, 50 knots for the eastern and central Aleutians. 3,000 feet looking like this. Pretty good winds coming around with this low swinging up off the coast there, 30, 35 knots. Across the Gulf of Alaska, picking up to about 40 to 55 knots here into Kodiak Island. Good stiff wind, especially across the Alaska Range and into the interior, 35 to 45 knots. Turbulence looking like this. Moderate chop here from the western Alaska Range all the way out across the Fox Islands, but improving from west to east for the central Aleutians.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSS NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the Hazardous Weather Test Bed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Again, not a lot of change here from what we saw yesterday or even the day before. Some open water now, a little bit more ice, but not much there north of St. Lawrence Island. And really not much change expected through the next few days, although Cook Inlet expected to lose all of the ice over the next 3-day period. So from there, move on to coastal water forecast. East winds 30 knots on the south coast with gale force easterlies on the north coast here with seas 14 to as high as 15 feet. Northern Canal, look for northerlies tomorrow. 25 knots, small craft advisories there with 20-knot winds for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait southeast at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. And the outlook for Wednesday, lighter winds out along the outer coastline, but still up to 25 knots, small craft advisories with seas at 11 feet. Easterlies, 20 knots, seas 11 feet on the south coast. Lighter winds also over the inside waters, east or variable to east here for Clarence Strait. Northerlies 15, Stevens Passage, as well as throughout Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. For Cook Inlet, north of the Forelands, small craft advisories, northeast 25 tomorrow. And then we've got gales south of the Forelands, so a pretty windy day coming up with 40-knot gales there for Kachemak Bay, 14-foot seas. Almost a storm warning there for the Barren Islands. East 45 knots, 23-foot seas. Down to minimum gales for the western North Gulf Coast. 30 knots for the eastern coast. Prince William Sound, northeast 20, seas 3 feet. And then really light winds, variable to northeast at 10 with slight seas for Prince William Sound. 20 knots from the east here for the eastern North Gulf Coast with lighter easterlies here to the west, and then northeast at 15 for the Barren Islands. And winds really come down on Wednesday from tomorrow there for Cook Inlet, northeast at 10 with slight seas. Same thing for the Kachemak Bay zone. And for Shelikof Strait tomorrow, storm warning, northeast 50 knots, a good gale out of the east along the east side of Kodiak Island. Minimum gales from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, and then Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, northwest at 45 knots, northwest 35 knots, so a little lighter but still a gale there on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, and a brisk northeast wind at 30 knots from Bristol Bay. That'll fall back to about 10 knots, just barely a breeze there on Wednesday with northerly winds at 20 knots here across the peninsula, 12 to 15-foot seas. And Castle Cape up to Sitkinak, as well as the east side of Kodiak Island, northeast at 15 knots, 11 to 13-foot seas, down to 10 knots there for Shelikof Strait. And for the Aleutians, Fox Islands, westerlies 30 knots on the Bering Sea side of the islands there, 17 to 20-foot seas, and then minimum gales here on the south side with seas anywhere either side of 20 feet. And then minimum gales also for the central Aleutians, west 35 knots, pretty uniform wind pattern. Seas a little higher here, up to 24 feet, and 35 to 40 knot winds all the way out to Shimei and Attu. Then things get a little more unorganized on Wednesday. Northeast 35 become northwest 35 there for those western zones. Central Aleutians, Adak and Atka. Northeast 30, seas 8 to 16 feet. And then lighter winds now for the Fox Islands, coming down 15 to 20 knots from the north to northeast. And then for the southwest coast, small craft advisories here, northeast 25, 8-foot seas on south of Nunivak Island, west 20 of the Pribilofs, east 25 for St. Matthew Island, northeast 25 there for St. Lawrence Island. And then for the next day, Wednesday, northeast 20, St. Lawrence Island, a little lighter in Norton Sound. Northerlies 10 to 15 here along the southwest coast. And for the Pribilofs, north 15, St. Matthew Island, north at 15. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, tomorrow brisk wind advisories there with the strongest winds here in the eastern zones to demarcation point at 30 knots, just 20 knots there in the central coast. West side even lighter, west or easterlies at 10 knots, all the way down to Cape Thompson. And then those northeasterlies pick up to 20 knots on down to through from Cape Thompson to Wales. And for Wednesday, we've got northeasterlies 15 here for the central and western coast from Cape Beaufort down to the Bering Strait, north 20, and still a brisk wind advisory holding at 30 knots there for the eastern zone of the Beaufort Sea. And then for tonight, again, warm front dissipates, rain becomes a little more showery, intermittent, and less heavier, and but the front will increase in rain again toward morning as it approaches the Panhandle. Gales for the North Gulf Coast with a chance of rain along the coast. And the low center there keeps it wet and windy over Kodiak Island. And this front weakens off the southwest coast. More rain with that trough for the Panhandle. Let's look at the weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.